Georges Niang once again cemented his legacy in Philadelphia, speaking out about Ben Simmons and his beef during his time with the organization and why Ben Simmons particularly rubbed him the wrong way. He was chopping it up with Richard Jefferson on a recent podcast when he was asked the question of, is there any guy or player in the league that just rubs you the wrong way, a guy that you just don't particularly like? And Georges Niang said the name that I think pops to the mind for a lot of us, speaking out about Ben Simmons. And the full quote that he gives is, he starts by saying like he kind of came into the experience or came into the organization in which there was that period of time. And then he goes, he was walking around the facility. You'd be like, what's up, man? Because they were like trying to welcome back. And he just nod. And that's when I was like, F this dude. If I get the opportunity to play this dude, I'm going to be an asshole. Like, there's etiquette. I'm not going to go past that. But the reality is, do not like the dude. So I did love it out of Georges Niang for that to be the case, for him to call it out like that. And by the way, he walked the walk. He did not just talk the talk there, because I vividly remember Georges Niang getting in his face, drawing a technical, and everything else when those two did match up against each other. And Niang honestly dove into a pretty real point about it, that he spoke towards Ben being a reason why he wanted to come to Philadelphia in the first place. Like, from a basketball perspective, he looked at it as a great fit. When you think about what Ben does as a basketball player, or did at that period of time, is he was a guy that drove to the basket and kicked out to three-point shooters. For a guy like Niang, he was like, this is perfect for my career. So while the city of Philadelphia and the Sixers particularly viewed the Ben Simmons situation as him harming the franchise, Niang looked at it as, he's harming my career. That he was positioned to be in a spot where he could have had a career year and find a paycheck, and it really kind of damaged those odds. Now, granted, happily, Niang was still able to find a way to get the job done and did find himself a really healthy payday. This year, coming off a career year with the Cleveland Cavaliers, which he averaged 9.4 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, 1.2 assists, shot 37.6% from three, 44.9% from the field, and to be honest, the shooting split's a little bit down than was the case in Philadelphia. To take a look at kind of his stats versus Ben Simmons, I thought was a little interesting here as well, so I didn't want to pull these up exactly here. Since this period of time in which we're kind of referring to, Ben Simmons, since the 2020-21 season, has played 57 games. He's had 383 total points and attempted just 2 3-pointers over that time. Georges Niang, on the other hand, has played 236 games, 2,105 total points, and 459 for 1,167 three-point attempts, which is a 39.3% rate. And shout out to Georges Niang, who still managed to get himself paid, making just over $8 million with the Cleveland Cavaliers this year. I understand why the Sixers were unable to match that, or unwilling to match that, and for what it's worth, to put that in perspective, that is slightly more than Kelly Oubre will be making this year. So you do got to prioritize the assets, and I do think the Sixers made the right decision, but I'm happy to see him getting a bag. Now, what the lesson here is for me, I think Georges Niang is everything that Ben Simmons is not. And what I mean by that is Ben Simmons is a guy who is as naturally gifted as they come and has just about zero when it comes to the desire to win, the desire to get better, improve, and master your craft. Then compare that to a guy like Georges Niang, a guy who lacks the physical gifts, and will be the first one to tell you that. And as evidence of that, we do have this quote from him here talking about, quote, listen, I'm not like a Ferrari like you guys. I'm more like a minivan. I need a couple laps around the block before I get to full speed. So I do love the self-awareness from him, which is another category in which Ben Simmons completely lacks. But what Niang did that I think is such a testament to himself is he's made more out of his career than I think what anybody thought was possible. This was a guy who played overweight for periods of time at Iowa State back in his college days, and still isn't a guy that has what you would expect from an NBA body, but he's mastered his craft, he's found a lane, and he's gotten good at it. He competes every second he's on the floor, he leaves his body on the line, he'll take charges, he tries on defense as much as he possibly can, even though, again, he is physically limited in some of these areas, and he found a lane where he shined. He became a master of the three-point shot, and he makes sure to take them often. And even during his period of time with Philadelphia, he wasn't just a guy taking open catch and shoot threes. He was doing more than that he would launch those tough contested that the team needed. He made a quite healthy career and made that paycheck really playing off Joel Embiid, challenging teams to double down on him and then leave him open and punishing him when they did. It was a great fit here in Philadelphia, and I was very happy with the 2 years that we got with Georges Niang. And my love for him has really only grown since a lot of these comments come out in the post-Philadelphia era. So shout out to Georges for a guy who was the 50th overall pick. I think a lot of people were skeptical of even ever being able to make it to the NBA. So pretty cool that he has found a way to stick around. And once again, I just think that's a direct, just polar opposite when comparing it to Ben Simmons. And to talk a little bit more about Ben Simmons, let's take a look at his full stats here. Since this period of time in which he did have this holdout, he did not play at all in the 21-22 season. just 42 games the following year, just 15 games this year. Oh yeah, and by the way, he's still on a max contract that the Nets will still be paying him $40 million plus for this season, in which we will see how many games he suit ups, but I'm not very optimistic it's many. And with Ben Simmons, it does feel like the dust has settled a little bit. In fairness to the Sixers franchise, things have worked out pretty well to this point. Then we did have the James Harden experience, which obviously did not take this team as far as was hoped when that deal was made, but you can't argue that they got the better hand of that deal. That they at least had a puncher's chance with James Harden rather than a guy that straight up refused to play for this franchise. Then moving on beyond that, Paul George coming to the Sixers team. And we understand what he means. We saw the emergence of Tyrese Maxey, which we may not have seen at such a rapid rate if Ben Simmons did not hold out. That don't forget that at this period of time, after Tyrese's rookie year, that it was a stretch in which Maxey was really only playing minutes off the bench. And really the debate going into that season for the Sixers team is it Tyrese Maxey or Shake Milton that can hold down the starting point guard job? And that is insane to think about considering what we know Tyrese Maxey to be at this point and what he's only going to be growing from here. So, and then beyond that, bringing in Paul George just puts this team in the best spot that it has been through the entirety of my lifetime. And I think you'd make an argument that this is the most talented Sixers team in true decades. So the bottom line is it has worked out for the Sixers franchise, even though Ben Simmons deserves zero of that credit. And it is frustrating. I think to me personally, watching the Boston Celtics win a championship this year did hit a little bit home for Ben Simmons. And like the standpoint of that was supposed to be Joel and Ben. That there was a period of time in which those were the guys. Don't forget Joel Embiid speaking about how he wants to play his entire career with Ben Simmons and how good they were for a period of time. And I do think lost in kind of the Ben Simmons transgression and storytelling at this point is two things. Number one, that the dude was legit good for a period of time. He was a real deal all-star. There was a period of time in which he was impacting winning at such a high level, and it's really just straight up disappointing to see the way his career has fallen off a cliff. And number two, don't forget what a scumbag this dude was on the way out. That this is the same dude who, for a variety of reasons, refused to go to camp and literally sued the Sixers to try and get money back. And to give the details of that here, we have Simmons and the National Basketball Players Association filed a grievance in April after discussions between Simmons representatives at Clutch Sports and the 76ers didn't result in a settlement, sources said. The sides entered into an arbitration process but reached a settlement agreement prior to a judgment. Philadelphia had repeatedly insisted that Simmons was in breach of his contract under the collective bargaining agreement, because he absolutely was, between the NBA and NBAPA, and had the right to recoup the money to advance him for next season. After Simmons made a trade request, the 76ers maintained Simmons breached his player contract upon failing to show up for the start of training camp and refusing to play during the preseason and regular season. Simmons arrived in Philadelphia near the end of preseason but cited his mental health as the reason for his participation in team activities was so limited. The 76ers and Simmons disagreed over the degree of access that the team had, and its doctors were allotted to Simmons to diagnose and affirm his mental health, sources said. And the root of this, the issue that was here, is the Sixers wanted their doctors to be able to at least talk to Ben Simmons, and Simmons can't refuse. They would send paperwork, they would make their argument, make their case, and the Sixers were like, look, we can't sign off on anything. We can't have our people look at you, which is completely fair. At that point in time, Simmons refusing to even come to the organization, and it even holds less weight when you think about the full context in order. That there's no doubt that mental health is a real issue in this world, in this country, and in professional sports. But the reality is that was like the fourth excuse that Ben Simmons used. First it was the back, then there was a bunch of other things, and then it was mental health. And that dilutes it for people that is a real issue for, and makes it hard to really believe you for this. It's a boy cried wolf type of case that Ben Simmons put himself in. And also, real quick shout out to Daryl Morey for being capable of looking down the barrel here. Think about how many GMs would have squandered or been worried in that type of situation, and not Daryl Morey. He hung in there, looked at Ben Simmons, said, we are not rolling over and just going to your will. That we see so often, so many of these star players, which at the time you still kind of loosely got to throw Ben Simmons in that category, they just get what they want. And Daryl Morey made the determination that I'm not doing whatever you want. I'm holding my ground until I can find an opportunity for what's best for the organization. And again, it did not fully work out with James Harden, but that was the right move at the time. You can debate the trade package and that type of thing, but the reality is we were in win-now mode. He took a chance on his guy James Harden, which he then stared down the barrel in a pretty impressive way during that situation as well. So shout out to Daryl Morey for navigating his team through some really tough rosters. Shout out to Georges Niang for keeping it real in the way that he constantly does. And to Ben Simmons, it's kind of nice that you are no longer at the forefront of my mind, and I think the minds of Philadelphia. That a guy that I thought I would have permanently painted as one of the biggest villains, and I don't take him off that list by any means, but he just kind of feels like a nothing. Like, this isn't a guy that I'm fired up or can't wait to compete against. It's just a dude that I almost, to an extent, just feel sorry for a guy that will go down as one of the all-time wastes of potential. A guy that could have been an all-time great that ultimately will end up being a who knows what he will be remembered as. He likely will go down remembered more for his off-the-court streaming video games than anything that he did on the basketball floor, which is so sad considering where the baseline was for how much talent that man has. So overall, shout out to Georges Niang for keeping it real. You are welcome back in Philadelphia anytime. And to Ben Simmons, whatever, man. We're moving on, water under the bridge. This Sixers team's got a championship to win. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning into this video here. If you have not already, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video. And I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.